Hello, everybody. Before we jump into the walkthrough of RIAS, I want to set it in context. Most revenue teams today don't have a strategy problem. They've got a visibility problem. Deals are taking longer, win rates are under pressure, forecasts are unreliable, and too much revenue still depends on a very small group of top performers. And the challenge is that the signals that explain why this is happening are buried across all the disparate systems in our organization. So our emails, our calls, our meetings, our CRM, and all of these systems are disconnected, and it's impossible to analyze all this data manually. And we solve that with what we call revenue insights as a service. So RIAS brings together all of these disparate sources, and it turns it into clear board level insights that answer the questions every CRO cares about. Where is the revenue leaking today? What deals are real and which are at risk? What are our top performers doing differently, and how do we scale that behavior? And what actions will actually move the win rates, scale velocity, and forecast accuracy? What makes this different from dashboards or AI point solutions is that it isn't just analytics, it's insights with direction. Every finding is tied specific to a specific action across pipeline health, deal execution, sales coaching, and go-to-market efficiency. The deck I'm about to walk you through is the output of RIAS, built entirely from real activity data, not opinions or gut feel. It shows exactly what's happening in the revenue engine today, why it's happening, and where focusing will create the biggest impact at the fastest amount of time. So let's get into it. I like to set the scene by talking about the fact that while the sales leaders that you're talking to have decades of experience, none of us have sold in 2026 before. And we're seeing fewer deals are closing, and we need to figure out how to fix that. So before we jump into RIAS, what I try and do is set the scene by talking about the state of the market and what we're seeing in the industry. And we produce our B2B benchmark report every year, and then we do an update halfway through the year. And from the latest data, you can see is that on average, quotas have dropped by about 13% across the B2B sales market. However, even though the quotas have dropped, we're still seeing that 3/4 of sellers are missing their quota, and that number is just not sustainable. We can also see that sales efficiency has dropped this year, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And sales velocity delta, the difference between what our top performers are achieving and the rest of our sales team has widened, and that gap has widened now to over 10x. So if we think about sales efficiency, this is a data point that I'd encourage all of our customers to be thinking about. And it's a great way to see if their go-to-market motion is getting more or less efficient this quarter versus last quarter. There's lots of valid reasons why it might reduce over time. Perhaps they're ramping up some new sellers, but we want to see that the impact that they're having by being more data-driven should see the sales efficiency increase quarter on quarter. So that's calculated by average deal value times win rate divided by average sales cycle. And we can see that over the last year, that sales efficiency has actually dropped. One of the other data points we lean into a lot is sales velocity. And again, trying to understand, this is a great way of comparing apples and oranges because it distills down how a seller's performing down to dollars per day. The calculator is familiar to most. You can see here that our top performers are working on average 2.5 times more deals. Their ACV is higher, their win rates are 43% higher, and the time to close, the sales cycles are much shorter. And when you put that together into the calculator, we're seeing that our top performers are generating over 10 times more revenue per day than our average sellers across the business. One of the other takeaways we saw from the benchmarks is that there's a big motion moving towards kind of full cycle selling. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later. But if we can get the sellers taking a role in top funnel and also continue to hold a level of responsibility once the deals are signed, we're seeing that can actually reduce the time to close and increase the win rates and give us that kind of land and expand motion. But the biggest problem we're seeing our customers are facing is that just 14% of their sellers are now generating 80% of new logo revenue. And this slide talks a little bit about what those challenges are. B players are much more likely to lack a critical event in their sales cycle. We know that, for example, engaging those decision makers earlier in the sales process increases our win rate dramatically, especially if we can get the engagement score above 40. In addition to producing the benchmark report, we also interviewed over 200 CROs last year. And from the data, we can see that 2/3 of those CROs are reviewing their ICP either once a year or less. And that's a real problem. ICP should be a living, breathing document, and it can continue to be evolved, and we can go more and more granular as we get access to more and more data points. So I'd encourage people to be looking at ICP, and some of the data that we're now analyzing can help them to get much closer to what their ICP actually looks like. So how do we fix these problems? Well, we introduced what we call RIAS, or Revenue Insights as a Service. The report itself is broken into 5 chapters, and let's jump straight into it. So the first chapter is what we call GTM overview. And here the customer will get a quick summary of where they're at. And one of the other takeaways we'll show them is what proportion of the contacts that we found in their mailboxes that they've been engaging with, the customers and prospects, never made it into Salesforce. And that's a really nice takeaway because if they want, we can put that data into Salesforce for them, along with who holds that relationship, when did they last engage, and that engagement score trending up and down over time can be written back into Salesforce if they purchase the relationship intelligence product. What we're seeing a lot at the moment is the sales velocity dropping at most companies. Now, this company is actually pacing in the right direction, but when we jump into the data, we can see that actually the only reason that their sales velocity is continuing to increase this year versus last is that they had a big increase in pipeline volume, lots more activity top of funnel. But when we look at the actual sales process itself, we can see that they've seen a 10% drop in win rate, a 4% increase in the sales cycle length, and a 6% decrease in ACV. So the only reason they're winning is because they're putting a lot more in top of funnel and they're becoming more efficient in the way that they're doing things. But when we look at the data underneath it, there's some underlying challenges. Here, what we're looking at is trying to understand the revenue they're generating per seller every quarter. And you can see here that this year, the numbers are starting to trend down. The only positive here is that we can see that the volume of sellers that we've taken into account has actually increased quite dramatically. It's jumped by nearly 80%. So it's quite possible that maybe they're still in a ramping phase. And so we'd expect to see those numbers moving up and to the right again. So we then get into the win-loss analysis. And at this point, what we're trying to understand is what's causing deals to close won versus close lost. Now, from here, what we can see is that one of the cornerstones of the platform that we built is understanding the impact of engagement on win rates. So we codify every relationship the business has and give everyone a score out of 100. And we can see very clearly that when we win for this particular customer, when we win, their average engagement is 88, while when they lose, it's just 62. And their win rates are nearly 2.5 times higher when their engagement's above 90. Worth noting that in the bottom right-hand corner of each of these slides, you can see the data sources we've used to create that specific slide. This one's looking at the impact of slippage on win rates. So we can see very clearly that if the deal slipped 14 days or less, they've got a fantastic win rate. But very quickly, once the slippage gets above 90 days and then above 180 days, their win rates are down to single digits. Now, that's a problem, but that problem gets even higher when we can see that a third of the deals that are currently in pipeline have got that level of slippage. And so we know that that's going to have a big negative impact on their ability to forecast because those deals have got a very low win rate. And if they're not taking that into account, they're never going to hit their number. Now, one of the things we're able to do if the customer's using, say, Gong as their call recorder is to digest all of those transcripts and reprocess them and analyze how well or badly the customer's been qualified, not just at the discovery stage, but through the whole sales cycle. Now, in this case, we've scored that qualification out of 4. It's a MEDDPICC score, but we can use other methodologies if they like. And we can see for this customer specifically, when the qualification score is above 3, their win rates are 7 times higher. So it really matters that we need to be doing better qualification, and it's important that we capture that information. Highlight that point. What we've got here is a quick summary of how the business is overall when they close a deal, close won or close lost, what level of qualification is done. And then we're comparing that on the right-hand side to the top territory. So it's more than just a coincidence that the top territory is outperforming the rest of the sales team. You can see from the data that actually they do better qualification, and that's what's helping them to win more. This one's looking at the efficiency of the sales process depending on the size and shape of the deal. And unsurprisingly, our largest deals are giving us the best efficiency or the dollars per day. But from the takeaway here is that only 9% of the deals closed actually fits that criteria. So we might want to be pushing them to invest more top of funnel activity on those larger opportunities. Now, on this one, what we're trying to understand is the impact of time on win rates. So, for example, we can see that the small deals are closing on average as 1 after 30 days. But we're holding on to the close loss deals for far too long because on average, they stay in pipe for 119 days. So by highlighting this to the customer, we're helping them, we're giving them the graphics and the visuals that they need to be able to encourage the sales team to close those deals off as lost sooner and focus on something a lot more productive. Now we're starting to look at different signals around ICP. And one of the things we'll do is bring on third-party firmographic data to analyze the industries that their close won deals are coming from. And we can see here that these 5 industries have got the most efficient outcomes. Their dollars per day are the highest across their business. But those opportunities, the volume of deals here only represent just over 9% of the pipeline. So we might want to encourage them to focus much more energy on generating opportunities in those high-performing industries. Other data points we can look at or other ICP attributes that we can look at are the size of the businesses that they're selling into, whether they're B2B or B2C, and then the market that those customers are focused on. And again, all of this will help us to build a picture from a data-driven perspective as to what their ICP really is. We know that the more multi-threaded our customers are, the more likely they are to win a deal. But by quantifying it, they can actually encourage the sales team to get the right number of stakeholders involved at the right stage of the sales process. So in this case, we can see that this customer, when they win, they've got an average of just over 6 stakeholders actively engaged, while when they lose, it's normally just about 2.5. Now, the data is showing us that their win rates are over 9 times higher when they get 6 or more stakeholders actively involved in the sales process. Again, this helps the sellers or the sales managers to actually encourage the sellers to be more multi-threaded at earlier stages in the sales process, will have a positive impact on outcomes. We're also highlighting which personas are having the biggest impact, and we can break that down now to levels of seniority as well, and look at the positive or negative impacts those senior heads have on a specific outcome. So as we jump into pipeline health, now we've done all this work around ICP definition, we can see that the latest quarter, only just over 7% of their live pipeline matches at either high or very high ICP fit. And therefore, and historically, that's been much closer to about a third of the deals. And we can see that there's no surprise that because the volume of deals that match ICP has reduced so much, we can actually see that that's contributing to a decline in ACV of 26% and a drop in win rates of 11%. So we might want to highlight this to them, give them the quantifiable data so that they can actually focus on generating more of their the pipeline from ICP. And next quarter, when we run the report again, we'll see that data, hopefully they move that in the right direction. The first report we produce for this customer will go back a year, and then every quarter we sit with the leadership team and give them an update on how they're pacing. So they get 4 reports a year from us, and we get to present that back to the leadership team. Here, what we're looking at, the different territories and the maturity of their pipeline. So we can see at the top the average number of sales days it takes, or the average sales cycle for each of the different territories. And of course, if that number's above 90, then it takes longer than a full quarter to get those deals closed. So if they're not already at an advanced stage as you enter the quarter, we're not going to close that deal. So territory 3, we can see has got 32% of their deals mature enough to close within the quarter, while territory 1 and 2 haven't got anywhere near enough pipeline to hit their number. So we can see very early that there's a problem there, and we might want to start to think about how we hit that number in Q2 or the following quarter to try and get more of the territories, give them a decent chance on winning, on hitting their quota number for the quarter. We're able to look back into Salesforce just to understand what proportion of the deals they're working on have got a MEDDPICC score or a MEDDPICC note against it. Now, again, we can use different qualification methodologies, and it's worth noting we've got our own call intelligence product that if this number is low, they can implement, and it will automate the process of capturing that back into Salesforce. We saw earlier the impact of low engagement on win rates was material. And what we're doing now is looking at the live pipeline and categorizing what proportion of the deals in each of the stages has got an unacceptably low level of engagement. And here we can see that 53 of their 254 deals in flight, which represents over 3.5 million in pipeline, have got an engagement score below 60. So they might want to click in and view that in more detail. Another side note here, if they click through onto this link, it'll actually allow them to log in and see the live real-time pipeline insights, which is in our console. Okay, so here what we're looking at is the impact of stalled, or what proportion of the deals have stalled in process, in the current sales process, and stalled by up to and then over 180 days. We saw earlier that the win rates are below our single digits when they've stalled by more than 180 days. And the concerning thing here is that they've got 38% of their pipeline that matches that criteria. So those deals are going to have a very low win rate, and they're probably taking up a lot of sales time when they might do better off at closing them off as lost sooner. We do the same looking at where the deals in the pipeline are slipping. Normally, it's quite okay for the deals to slip in discovery, and we're okay with that. But what we want to see is less slippage at these later stages. Now, here what we're looking at is existing customers. So we're trying to understand, we've bucketed all of the existing customers based on how much money they're spending with this company. And what we can see is that 48 of their largest accounts have got a relationship score under 60. These are existing customers, and we're not as engaged as we should be. And in fact, a third of all of their accounts have got an unacceptably low level of engagement. We can also see on the right-hand side that 56 of our largest deals have got no engaged contacts at all. Okay, and that's obviously not going to lead to any. That's not going to help us when it comes to cross-sell, upsell, or retention. And in fact, across the board, 43% of accounts are either single-threaded or not engaged at all. And by highlighting that number every quarter, we get to sit with the leadership team, and we want to see those numbers reduce. So as we get into coaching, one of the things we'll look at is their week 2 and week 4 commit and how accurate it is versus their actual number that they hit at the end of the quarter. We'll also try and break down the different territories' sales velocity. So you can see here the different territories and their leaders. We can also see what proportion of their quota they're achieving, what their average sales velocity is, and how that's pacing over the last 7 quarters. We can see their average win rates, the average sales cycle, average deal values, and number of opportunities they're working. But the most important column for me is this one on the right-hand side. And what we're doing here is highlighting what proportion of the expansion of the new revenue that they're generating is coming from expansion opportunities versus new logo opportunities. Now, we might want to make sure that we don't want it to be too high or too low. And by highlighting the problem, we can actually help them to realign their territories or highlight the fact they've got a problem with territory management. Now, I mentioned earlier that we process all of those historical call recordings. We're able to use that data now to compare how they're doing around their discovery. Are they getting better quarter on quarter around discovery? And do they need certain training in certain areas to get better again? We do the same with objection handling because we can go through all those historical calls. We can understand how well or badly they're doing at objections and if they're pacing it getting better over time. And then we turn that into numbers. So we can see here seller 6 in North America has got quite a low score when it comes to product knowledge. So they might want to we might want to do some extra training on that. And we found that all from the call recordings. So when we get into the GTM process, what we can see is that we start with looking at top of funnel and attribution. Where are the leads coming from? And not all leads are equal. So which ones are giving us the most efficient outcomes? And so once again, we lean into that dollars per day number. And we can see here that the AE outbound team are really productive. Their dollars per day is one of the highest. And the volume of leads that they're generating is also material. So this is really good news. However, if we look at the BDR team, their efficiency is really low. So we need to figure out, can we get the AEs to train the BDRs on how to be more efficient or target more efficient opportunities? Or maybe we need to use the BDR spend on something else more productive. Now, this one, what we've done here is we're looking at the different industries that we're working in, and then we're looking at the deal counts that we've got in those individual industries. Then what we've done is ranked those based on the volume. So, the highest volume gets ranked number 1. And then what we've done is also then ranked the win rates. So we can see, for example, technology, we've only got 20 opportunities. So it's ranked number 12 in the list of industries where we're selling into. But our win rate's up at 40%, and that's in the top 3. So we can see here that when the bars are moving to the left, we need to look for more opportunities in that space. While if the bars are moving to the right, we might want to not invest as much in those markets because those win rates are not quite as high as the volume to justify that. Now, here what we've done is we're trying to look at whether make sure that we're assigning the right opportunities to the right sellers. So, for example, we can see in territory 1, seller 2 has got a much better win rate in retail versus seller 1. But seller 1's got a great win rate in manufacturing. So maybe we need to move seller 1's retail opportunities into seller 2. And there's lots of examples of that here again in government and public sector. So making sure that we're channeling the right opportunities to the right seller will have a positive impact on the outcomes. Here, what we're looking at is the bottlenecks in the sales process. Where are we spending far too much time? Where are we having to see a big dropout during the sales cycle? Another way of looking at this one is here. I particularly like this graphic because what it does is it highlights, territory 7 is only allowing 25% of their opportunities out of the discovery phase, and they're seeing quite a lot of slippage in that very early phase. However, once they've qualified them out of discovery, look at the magic that happens next. The slippage is very low or non-existent, and the conversion rates are really high. We're able to get those customers through a sales process really well once we've gone through that qualification process. However, the rest of the territories are working in a very different way. And on average, they're seeing 2/3 of their opportunities lead discovery. And it's leading to lots of slippage and low conversion rates at the later stages. So we might want to encourage people to follow what territory 7 are doing. Here, what we're looking at is what proportion of the deals are skipping specific stages. And on average, that we're seeing over half of their deals are not working through the individual stages as you'd expect them to. So we might want to introduce more rigor around the gates and triggers for the individual stages. And that will have a positive impact on our ability to close one. Now, what we're looking at here is to understand, are the sellers keeping curious during the whole sales cycle? So not just in the discovery phase, but looking at all of the call recordings during the whole sales process, we can start to score how well they're qualifying, in this case, MedPick, through that whole journey. So we finished the report by summarizing the key findings. We also proposed some recommended next actions. And in this deck, if anyone wants to read it, we've got a couple of case studies here. This one in particular is really powerful. This is a PE-backed business where in the first year they saw increase in bookings of 29%. Average win rates went up. Average ARR growth was up by a third. They reduced their sales cycle materially and their forecast accuracy much closer to the number in that first 12 months. So helping businesses become data-driven, it's lots of incremental improvements that leads to better outcomes. And it's about getting everyone on the same page and everyone committed to being a lot more data-driven and following what best practice looks like. The challenge most organizations have is they really can't get this data in a place where they can turn it into pictures and get everyone to follow that best practice. And that's what we've unlocked here with RIAS.